More than 1,000 guests attended Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift's wedding, but some familiar NFL faces were nowhere to be found. A longtime teammate, close friends, and even the quarterback, who threw Kelce his first NFL touchdown, were all left off the list. So what happened? Let me catch you up. Once the wedding photos started circulating, it didn't take long for more names to surface. This wasn't just a case of a couple of guys missing an invite by accident. The pattern kept repeating, and each name added a little more weight to the story. Start with Compton, because his reaction says a lot about how blindsided some of these guys actually were. He didn't find out through a phone call or a text explaining the guest list got too big. He found out by scrolling social media like everybody else. At last year's Tight End University, Compton and Lewan posed alongside Kelce and Taylor Swift. At first, the former Titans player played it cool, saying he didn't think anything of it, but that changed fast once he started scrolling through photos from the event. That's the moment it stung. Not the initial absence of an invite, the photos afterward. What really got under his skin was seeing who else made the cut. He noticed Dean Blandino got an invite and asked if that was real, clearly caught off guard that a TV rules analyst landed a spot he didn't. Blandino ran officiating for the NFL for years and now breaks down replay calls on television. Respected in the league, sure, but not exactly a guy with a decade-long friendship built on football camps and podcast appearances. Compton didn't hide his frustration once the photos kept coming. As I've been seeing these photos of everybody else at the wedding, I'm kind of flabbergasted why we didn't get the invite, Compton said. And the timing makes it sting even more. This wasn't some acquaintance who drifted apart from Kelce over the years. Just last month, Compton and Lewan were in Nashville for Tight End University, the 3-day football camp Kelce runs with fellow NFL stars George Kittle and Greg Olsen. And Swift even made a surprise appearance at the camp's concert, jumping on stage to sing with Lainey Wilson in front of a packed crowd. Swift showed up to their event, sang on their stage. Then, weeks later, neither Compton nor Lewan got a seat at hers. Lewan, for what it's worth, wasn't shy about how much he valued that friendship before any of this snub talk started. He'd been going on about his decade-long friendship with Kelce, calling him one of the few guys who hasn't changed, despite reaching a wild level of stardom. A decade of friendship and still no seat at the wedding. Dave Portnoy, who runs the media outfit Compton and Lewan work for, put it plainly when he brought it up on air. He pointed out that pretty much everyone connected to Tight End University showed up to celebrate Swift and Kelce, except for Compton and Lewan, which stings a little more given how close the pair have gotten to Kelce over the years. When your own camp co-founders, Kittle, Olsen, are in the building, and you're not, that's not a scheduling conflict. That's a decision. Now bring Chase Daniel back into it. His situation carries a different flavor than Compton's. Less current friend and more historical connection that should count for something. He backed up Kelce for a stretch of seasons in Kansas City before Mahomes ever arrived, back when the Chiefs were finding their footing. And the pass he threw Kelce wasn't some forgettable garbage time snap. It was a near 70-yard touchdown. That helped put Kelce on the map early in his career. Daniel clearly leaned into the humor of it rather than treating it like an actual grievance, but the underlying point stuck. If history and loyalty mattered here, you'd think the guy who threw Kelce's first NFL touchdown would rate a mention somewhere on an 1,100-person list. And that number is worth sitting with for a second. According to NBC News, around 1,100 guests were invited to the wedding. 1,100 people, that's not a wedding. That's closer to a small stadium section. And even with a list that size, guys who'd known Kelce for years hosted camps with him, thrown him passes, coached him. Some of them still didn't make it through the door. There was also a smaller gathering the night before, which makes the omissions even more pointed. There was also an intimate gathering the night before that featured around 100 guests, according to the New York Times. An intimate pre-wedding night, capped at 100 people, presumably reserved for the tightest circle. Neither Compton, Lewan, nor Daniel appear to have been part of that smaller room either. What makes this whole situation land differently than your average wedding invite gripe is the platform these guys have. Compton and Lewan didn't just quietly feel some type of way about it. They talked about it on one of the biggest sports podcasts in the country, with Portnoy actively pushing the conversation along, comparing names on the list. Daniel turned his snub into a viral post with actual video evidence attached. This wasn't whispered disappointment. It became public, in real time, while the wedding was still the top story in entertainment news. And Butker's situation sits in its own category entirely, separate from the "we're surprised we didn't get picked" energy of Compton and Daniel. His absence wasn't framed as an oversight by anybody covering the story. It was framed as a decision, tied directly to something he said publicly a year earlier. Something that had already created friction inside the Chiefs' own locker room before a single wedding invitation was ever sent out. That's the thread we need to pull next, because it didn't start at Madison Square Garden. It started at a college graduation more than a year before the wedding was ever planned. To understand why Butker didn't get an invite while nearly everyone else on the Chiefs roster did, you have to go back to a commencement stage in Kansas, months after Kansas City had just won its third championship in 5 years. Butker was invited to speak at Benedictine College's graduation, and instead of the usual congratulatory remarks, he used the platform to weigh in on the role of women. "I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you," Butker said to the graduating class. He kept going from there, telling the crowd that some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. He then pointed to his own wife as the example to follow, saying, "I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say her life truly started when she started living her vocation as a wife and as a mother." The reaction was immediate, and it wasn't limited to outside commentators. This came from inside his own building. Kelce didn't wait long to weigh in either, addressing it on the podcast he runs with his brother. Kelce responded to Butker's comments on an ensuing episode of his podcast, saying, "When it comes down to his views and what he said at the St. Benedict's commencement speech, those are his. That's a teammate publicly drawing a line between himself and what Butker said." On a show with millions of listeners, while the two of them were still sharing a locker room every single day. That distinction matters here, because it explains why this wasn't treated as some random scheduling miss. When the wedding list came out over a year later, every single other player on that roster, the backups, the special teamers, guys who barely see the field, got an invite. One player didn't, and it happened to be the one player who'd already put himself at odds with Kelce's own values, on a stage, in front of cameras, in a way that Kelce felt compelled to respond to publicly. It's worth remembering the timing of all this too. Butker delivered that speech in the spring, only months removed from celebrating a title with the very team he was representing. He'd built a reputation as one of the most reliable kickers in the league, a guy central to multiple championship runs, someone whose leg had directly won or preserved games that put banners in the rafters. None of that got erased, but it also didn't buy him a pass back into the circle that mattered on Kelce's biggest day. What makes it sting a little more is the contrast in how Kelce handled disagreement versus how he handled distance. He didn't publicly rip into Butker after the speech. He didn't call for him to be released or benched. He simply said on record that those views belonged to Butker and not to him. That's a fairly restrained response for how much noise the speech generated across the country. But restrained doesn't mean forgotten. And when it came time to build a guest list for the most photographed wedding of the year, that restraint apparently didn't extend to a seat in the room. There's also a layer here that doesn't get talked about enough. Butker wasn't just a teammate. He was a teammate whose career overlapped almost entirely with the rise of Kelce and Swift's public relationship. Kelce and Swift started their extremely public relationship in 2023, and her appearances at NFL games became front-page events. Butker was on that same sideline, in that same stadium, during the exact stretch when Swift's presence turned Chiefs games into a global spectacle. He watched that relationship unfold from a few lockers away. And still, when it came time to celebrate it, he wasn't part of the room. Compare that to how the rest of the roster was treated. Guys like Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cooper Kupp, George Kittle, and others were all spotted at the wedding. Not just current Chiefs, former teammates, guys who'd moved on to other franchises, still made the trip and got the invite. Butker, still actively on the roster, still kicking every Sunday for Kansas City, was the outlier. When basically your entire workplace gets invited to your wedding and one specific person doesn't, that's not an oversight. That's a message, even if nobody ever says it out loud. And unlike Compton or Daniel, Butker hasn't gone on a podcast to express confusion about it, hasn't posted a joke online, hasn't done any version of the flabbergasted routine. The silence itself says something. There's no ambiguity to clear up the way there was with Compton wondering if it was some innocent oversight. Everybody watching this story already understood exactly why that particular name wasn't on the list, because the reason had already played out publicly more than a year earlier. So while Compton, Lewan, and Daniel are dealing with the sting of being close to Kelce and still missing the cut, a sting rooted in logistics, favoritism, or just the impossible math of trimming a guest list even at 1,100 people. Butker's situation is a different animal entirely. His is rooted in something that had already caused a rift before a single wedding invitation went out. That difference matters because it shapes how each of these guys is processing being left out. And it shapes how the public has reacted to each case very differently too. To really understand the sting of these snubs, you have to look at exactly who did get through the door. Because the guest list wasn't small, and it wasn't limited to football. This wasn't a wedding, it was closer to a live cross-section of two entire industries meeting in one arena. Start with the football side, since that's the lane most relevant here. Football stars George Kittle, Matthew Stafford, Kareem Hunt, and Baker Mayfield were all in attendance, along with popular sports broadcasters Aaron Andrews and Charissa Thompson. That's quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, a real spread of current NFL talent, not just Chiefs players showing up out of obligation. Kittle, in particular, has been one of the more visible NFL figures, tied to this wedding from the start, given his role running tight end university alongside Kelce. San Francisco 49ers star George Kittle and his wife, Claire, attended the Swift-Kelce wedding. Kittle also ended up being the source for one of the more unusual details to come out of the whole event. Kittle revealed the couple had banned wedding gifts, instead instructing close friends and family to make charitable donations. From a hand-picked list of organizations the couple would prefer guest support. He'd shared that detail before the big day even happened, mentioning to a reporter that despite the no gifts rule, he was still tempted to bring Kelce something small and personal. They said absolutely no gifts, but I was thinking Travis, for some reason, really likes old coins. So I might get him an old coin, Kittle shared. That's the kind of detail that only comes from someone who was actually inside the circle, not someone reading about the wedding from the outside. Beyond Kittle, plenty of other current and former players rounded things out. Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cooper Kupp, and George Kittle were among the players spotted, and it's widely assumed both Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid attended as well. Mahomes and Reid being their tracks. Mahomes is Kelce's quarterback for the better part of a decade of championship runs, and Reid has coached him the entire time. If anyone belonged in that room from a football standpoint, it's those two. Then there's the entertainment side, which honestly dwarfed the football contingent in sheer star power. Celebrities in attendance included Adam Sandler, Hugh Grant, Jason Sudeikis, and many others, such as Swift's music friends. Sandler didn't just attend, he ran the whole ceremony. Actor Adam Sandler was the surprising officiant at the ceremony, and Stevie Nicks performed among a crowd packed with stars of sports and entertainment. Music legend duties didn't stop there either, with reports that Stevie Nicks, a longtime mentor of Swift, performed at the reception, alongside Paul McCartney, though Swift herself did not perform. The names kept stacking beyond music and football. Swift and Kelce's guest list drew a heavy contingent of entertainment industry executives, including Steven Spielberg, Disney CEO Bob Iger, Disney Entertainment co-chair Dana Walden, Universal Music Group chairman Lucian Grange, and AMC Theaters CEO Adam Aron. That's not a wedding guest list anymore. That's closer to an industry summit with vows in the middle of it. Family made up the emotional core of the day, even amid all that star power. Other key family members in attendance included Travis Kelce's parents, Ed and Donna Kelce, and Taylor Swift's parents, Scott and Andrea Swift. The wedding party leaned on siblings rather than a traditional lineup. They did not have bridesmaids or groomsmen. Swift's brother, Austin Swift, served as her man of honor, and Travis's brother, Jason Kelce, served as best man. Even Jason's kids got folded into the ceremony, acting as flower girls for the day, according to details that leaked out despite the tight security around the event. And security really was the story behind the story. The famous venue was reportedly selected because of its exceptional security, allowing guests to arrive through underground VIP entrances while remaining hidden from photographers. Staff working the event had to agree to serious restrictions just to be on site. Staff involved in preparing the venue were reportedly required to sign non-disclosure agreements, surrender their mobile phones, and wear specialist wristbands before being allowed access. Even law enforcement wasn't exempt from the lockdown. Law enforcement had their phones confiscated upon entering the venue, with every person walking in having their phones taken and no one allowed to enter the building ahead of the wedding. That level of lockdown makes the guest list even more revealing, because getting an invite here wasn't just a nice gesture. It meant being trusted enough to sit inside one of the most heavily controlled celebrity events in recent memory, which is exactly why the names left off the list stand out as much as they do. When you build a wall that high around who gets in, everyone left standing outside it notices. Even with that wall, some details leaked anyway. Guests reportedly ran into an awkward wardrobe overlap during the celebration, with two attendees showing up in the exact same gown by complete coincidence. Proof that even NDAs and confiscated phones couldn't keep every detail locked down forever. So when you stack this list up, Hollywood royalty, music legends, sitting CEOs, an entire wing of professional football's biggest names, against the guys who didn't make it, the omissions start to look less like an accident of scale and more like a set of quiet, deliberate choices. 1,100 seats, and somehow specific familiar faces from Kelce's own career still ended up on the outside. Once the ceremony wrapped and the photos started circulating widely, the snubbed players didn't just quietly absorb it. They took it public, each in his own way, and the reactions ended up becoming almost as big a story as the wedding itself. Compton's version played out over the phone, live, on air. He called into a show hosted by Portnoy specifically to talk through what happened, and the conversation didn't shy away from naming names. "I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think nothing of it," he told Portnoy, before that changed fast once he started scrolling through photos from the event. That's a guy trying to play it cool in real time and failing, because the evidence kept stacking up against him, staying calm about it. What pushed him over the edge wasn't just seeing celebrities he didn't know. It was seeing names from inside football's own orbit, who he felt should have ranked below him on any invite list. Turns out all these photos I keep seeing. I saw Dean Blandino got an invite. Is that real? He asked, clearly caught off guard that a TV rules analyst landed a spot he didn't. A rules analyst getting a seat while a guy who's run football camps with Kelce for years didn't. That's the exact kind of detail that turns mild disappointment into on-air venting. Lewan, for his part, didn't get into the same kind of pointed comparison, but his own comments before the wedding ended up reading differently in hindsight. He'd spent time gushing about Kelce's loyalty and how stardom hadn't changed him, and about how much tight end University had grown thanks to the guys who show up early to build real relationships before cameras roll. Then the cameras rolled somewhere else, at a wedding he wasn't part of. Chase Daniel handled his own snub with a lighter touch, but the substance of his message carried real weight underneath the humor. His post about missing the invite despite throwing Kelce's first NFL touchdown spread quickly, partly because he backed it up with actual footage. Posting the video afterward, captioned simply as proof, turned a passing joke into something people could actually verify. And that combination of humor and receipts is exactly why it caught on the way it did across football media. What's notable is that none of these guys turned their snub into genuine anger at Kelce. Compton kept circling back to confusion rather than resentment. The tone throughout was, "I don't understand this," rather than, "I'm furious about this." Daniel wrapped his entire message in a joke, capping it off with a laughing emoji to make clear there were no real hard feelings behind it. That distinction matters because it shows these weren't guys trying to manufacture drama or pick a fight with a friend on his wedding day. They were guys genuinely surprised that years of connection didn't translate into a seat in the room. That contrast becomes sharper when you consider how much these same players had been folded into Kelce's world just weeks earlier. Compton and Lewan had been on stage, in photos, at events Kelce personally runs, only a month before the wedding happened. Daniel's connection ran even deeper historically. He wasn't some recent podcast friend. He was a former teammate from Kelce's earliest years in the league, present for one of the actual milestone plays of his career. These weren't strangers trying to claim proximity to fame after the fact. These were legitimate parts of Kelce's story who ended up outside the frame on the one day that mattered most publicly. Meanwhile, the players who did make it in leaned into the celebration without a hint of the tension playing out elsewhere. Kittle's comments about the no-gift policy came across as an insider sharing a fun detail, not someone navigating any awkwardness about being included. Reactions from other attendees echoed a similar tone. Genuine excitement, inside jokes. A real sense of celebration, rather than any acknowledgement that a chunk of the football world had been left standing outside. That gap, enthusiastic insiders on one side, publicly confused outsiders on the other, is what turned this into a bigger story than a typical who got invited to a celebrity wedding piece. It wasn't just gossip about seating charts. It was current and former NFL players, with real platforms and real audiences, processing being left out of one of the biggest events in their own social circle, in real time, for anyone watching to see. In the days since the wedding, the story hasn't really cooled off. If anything, each new detail that's leaked out has kept the guest list conversation alive, and the players left off it are still dealing with the fallout of having their absence broadcast to millions of people. Compton and Lewan haven't walked back anything they said. If anything, the conversation around their snub has kept circulating because of how directly it contrasted with everything they'd built with Kelce over the past several years. The camps, the podcast appearances, the photos from the year before standing right next to the couple. That kind of history makes an omission harder to explain away as a simple guest list numbers problem. Even with the count sitting north of 1,000, Daniel's situation has mostly settled into the kind of good-natured ribbing that football culture runs on. He made his point, backed it with video, added the laughing emoji, and let it become its own little moment in the broader wedding conversation rather than pushing it further. It's the kind of snub that gets referenced anytime Kelce and Daniel cross paths again, half joking but never fully going away either. Butker's situation remains the most layered of the group, because unlike the other two, there's no ambiguity to resolve. Nobody's expecting him to call into a podcast wondering why he wasn't there. The explanation already played out in public more than a year before the wedding, in the reaction to that commencement speech, and in Kelce's own response to it on his podcast. Whatever tension existed between the two of them going into the biggest day of Kelce's personal life, it apparently didn't dissolve on its own with time. It simply carried through, quietly, into a decision about who got a seat and who didn't. What ties all three cases together is that none of them were framed publicly by Kelce or Swift at all. There's been no statement, no interview addressing why specific names didn't make a list that otherwise stretched past 1,100 people. The silence from the couple hasn't stopped the conversation. If anything, it's left room for exactly the kind of public back and forth that's played out from Compton, Lewan, and Daniel over the last several days. The scale of the wedding itself makes all of this land harder than it might for an ordinary ceremony. This wasn't 20 people at a courthouse where a missed invite could believably be an oversight. It was a multi-day event with a rehearsal dinner, a headline-grabbing officiant, live performances from two of music's biggest legends, and a guest list built from Hollywood, the music industry's top executives, and huge chunks of the NFL. Against that backdrop, missing names stand out precisely because there was clearly room for almost everyone else. And that's really where this story sits right now. A wedding built to include practically an entire industry still managed to leave out a current teammate under a cloud from a year-old controversy, two close friends who'd shared a stage with the couple only weeks earlier, and a former quarterback with a genuine claim to a piece of Kelce's own football history. Whatever the reasoning behind each individual case, the pattern itself has become impossible to ignore, proof that even the most star-studded, heavily guarded celebration in recent memory couldn't make room for every